I'm not asking you to forgive me. She looked at him for the first time. Good. I'm asking whether they know my name. Nia hesitated. They know your first name. His voice became almost a whisper. Do they know I'm their father? She looked away. They guessed. Rowan closed his eyes. May I ask why you never told them? Because I refused to teach them to hate someone they had never met. He swallowed hard. Thank you. Tears gathered in his eyes again. You protected me when I didn't deserve it. Nia answered softly. I protected them. A long silence settled between them before Rowan asked the question that terrified him most. Would they even want to meet me? Nia didn't answer immediately. She thought about 5 birthdays, 3 first days of school, 3 frightened children asking why other families looked different, 3 little hearts that still believed somewhere in the world their father might simply be lost instead of absent. Finally, she spoke. That decision belongs to them. Rowan nodded. Then let them choose. 2 days later, a private jet landed quietly in Norhaven. Rowan sat beside Nia during the flight. Most of the journey passed in silence. Neither knew how to speak around years that could never be recovered. As the car approached Eleanor Voss's seaside home, Rowan's heartbeat became almost unbearable. Children's laughter floated through the open windows. Micah raced across the garden chasing a bright yellow kite. Mara sat beneath a tree painting seashells. Elias carefully helped Eleanor water flowers with a tiny green watering can. Rowan stopped walking. They were real. His children. His family. 5 years had been stolen from all of them. Nia looked at him. Remember? He nodded slowly. They owe me nothing. She opened the garden gate. Micah looked up first. Mom! The 3 children ran toward her together, before suddenly noticing the unfamiliar man standing nearby. Elias tilted his head. Mara squeezed Nia's hand. Micah studied Rowan with open curiosity. Mom? He asked quietly. Is this him? Rowan felt every breath leave his body, as Nia looked at the children she had raised with endless love. She knelt until her eyes met theirs. Then, with tears shining in the afternoon sunlight, she answered the question they had waited 5 years to hear. Yes, yes? The single word settled over the garden like the gentle breeze coming from the sea. None of the children spoke immediately. Micah looked at Rowan with open curiosity. Mara studied his face as though comparing it with memories she didn't know she possessed. Elias remained closest to Nia, his small fingers wrapped around her hand. Rowan stood completely still. He had negotiated with presidents and billionaires without fear, but 3 little children had reduced him to silence. He didn't want to frighten them. He didn't want to rush them. He simply wanted the chance he had thrown away before they were even born. Micah finally took one cautious step forward. You're our dad? Rowan swallowed hard. Yes. Another pause. I'm Rowan. The little boy frowned innocently. Mom already told us your name. Nia couldn't help smiling through her tears. Mara looked at Rowan carefully. Did you know about us? The question struck him like a blade. He refused to lie. No. The children exchanged confused glances. Elias spoke so quietly, Rowan almost didn't hear him. Did you not want us? Nia immediately knelt beside him. Elias? But Rowan gently raised one hand. Let me answer. He lowered himself onto one knee so he wasn't looking down at them. I didn't know you existed. His voice trembled. Someone lied to me. A very bad lie. And because I believed it, I lost 5 years with the 3 greatest gifts I never knew I had. The children listened without fully understanding the weight behind his words. Micah tilted his head. So, you're sad? Rowan laughed softly through tears. Very. Micah looked at his brother and sister before walking closer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small polished seashell. Whenever Mara cries, we give her something pretty. He held the shell toward Rowan. Maybe this will help. Rowan stared at the tiny shell before accepting it with shaking hands. No business award. No billion-dollar acquisition. No public honor had ever meant as much as that simple gift. Thank you, he whispered. Mara suddenly stepped forward. Mom says people who tell the truth deserve another chance. She looked at Nia. Is that still true? Nia met her daughter's eyes. She had spent 5 years teaching her children compassion without allowing it to become weakness. She answered honestly, sometimes. Mara nodded. Then she quietly hugged Rowan around the shoulders. He froze before slowly wrapping his arms around her with unbelievable care. His daughter, the little girl he had missed, holding from the very first moment of her life. Elias watched for several seconds before walking over too. He didn't hug Rowan. Instead, he took his hand. You have big hands, Rowan smiled. So do you. Elias placed his tiny palm against Rowan's. They fit almost perfectly. Cool, he whispered. Finally, Micah climbed onto Rowan's lap, as naturally as though years had never been stolen. Can you fly kites? He asked. I can learn, Rowan answered. Good, because mine always crashes. Nia stood quietly beside Eleanor Voss, both women watching the impossible scene unfold. Eleanor smiled. Children forgive much faster than adults. Nia nodded. Because they haven't learned to protect themselves yet. Eleanor looked toward Rowan, laughing softly, as Micah insisted on teaching him the correct way to hold the kite string. Maybe he'll spend the rest of his life earning what they just gave him in 5 minutes. Nia answered without taking her eyes off the garden. He should. The following weeks became something none of them expected. Rowan extended his stay in Norhaven indefinitely. The board of Ashcroft Quantum Systems objected at first, until Rowan appointed an interim executive committee and began leading remotely. He no longer measured success by quarterly reports. He measured it by breakfast conversations, bedtime stories, and afternoons spent discovering everything he had missed. He learned that Mara loved painting storms because she believed sunshine looked brighter afterward. He learned Elias secretly counted stars every night, before sleeping, because he wanted to make sure none disappeared. He learned Micah asked at least one impossible question before every meal. If fish get thirsty, do they drink water? One evening, all 3 children sat around Rowan while he attempted to assemble a complicated toy rocket. After 20 frustrating minutes, Micah sighed dramatically. Mom would have finished already. Rowan laughed. Your mom is smarter than me. Micah nodded seriously. We know. Even Nia laughed at that. Rowan looked toward her. The sound of her laughter was exactly as he remembered. It hurt and healed him at the same time. He never pressured her for forgiveness. He never spoke about rebuilding their relationship. He understood that trust returned slowly, if it returned at all. So he showed up every morning, every meal, every school event, every doctor's appointment, every bedtime story. He became dependable before asking to be loved. Months passed. The partnership between Ashcroft Quantum Systems and Lumera Biotech Solutions transformed healthcare across multiple countries. Rather than competing, both companies combined engineering with medical innovation to build portable hospitals for underserved regions. The project became an international model for ethical business cooperation. Reporters repeatedly asked how 2 rival CEOs had formed such extraordinary trust. Neither discussed the past, they simply pointed toward the work. One autumn afternoon, Rowan received an invitation from Belhaven Criminal Court. Vivian Mercer had accepted a plea agreement. She requested one final meeting before sentencing. Nia offered to accompany him. He shook his head. This is something I need to finish alone. Vivian looked older inside the prison meeting room. Not because of time, because bitterness had finally consumed everything else. She looked at Rowan through the glass partition. Did she forgive you? Rowan answered honestly. Not completely. Vivian smiled sadly. I thought if she disappeared, you'd eventually love me. Rowan looked at her with quiet compassion. Love isn't something you win by destroying another person. She lowered her eyes. I know that now. Silence lingered between them. Finally, Rowan stood. I hope one day you find peace. Vivian didn't answer. She simply watched him leave, realizing too late that obsession had cost her the very life she wanted. Months turned into a year. One warm summer evening, Micah, Elias, and Mara prepared a surprise picnic on the beach with Eleanor. They insisted Rowan help, despite his complete lack of decorating talent. Dad, Micah groaned. The sandwiches aren't supposed to look like triangles fighting each other. Rowan laughed. I'm trying. Mara carefully rearranged the blanket while Elias secretly placed wildflowers into a glass jar. When everything was ready, Nia walked down the path toward the beach. She stopped in surprise. What's all this? Micah grinned. Family dinner. As the sun slowly disappeared beneath the horizon, the 6 of them sat together sharing stories, laughter, and far too many burnt marshmallows. After the children chased waves along the shore, Eleanor quietly stood. I'll take them collecting shells. She smiled knowingly before walking away with the triplets, leaving Rowan and Nia alone for the first time in months. The ocean rolled gently onto the sand. Rowan looked at the horizon. I spent years believing success meant building the biggest company in the room. He shook his head. I was wrong. Nia listened quietly. The greatest thing I'll ever build is sitting over there looking for seashells. She followed his gaze. A soft smile appeared. They're remarkable. He looked back at her. Because of you. Silence settled comfortably between them. Rowan reached into his pocket and removed the tiny seashell Micah had given him the first day they met. He had carried it every day since. I keep this to remind myself that grace is a gift, not a right. Nia stared at the shell before looking into his eyes. You've changed. He nodded. Because losing you forced me to become the man I should have been before I ever met you. She took a slow breath. I don't know what the future looks like, Rowan answered gently. Neither do I. Another quiet moment passed before Nia reached across the blanket and took his hand. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a declaration of love. It was something far more valuable. It was trust beginning again. Rowan didn't squeeze her hand. He simply held it with gratitude. The children suddenly came running back toward them, shouting excitedly, "Look what we found!" Elias held up a perfectly shaped starfish before carefully returning it to the water. Mara carried a heart-shaped stone. Micah proudly waved another colorful kite. "Family picture," he shouted. "Everybody together." They gathered near the shoreline, while Eleanor balanced the camera on a driftwood log. "Ready?" she called. The children crowded between Rowan and Nia. Micah wrapped an arm around his father's waist. Mara leaned against her mother. Elias held both their hands. At the exact moment the camera clicked, the triplets all laughed together. The sound echoed across the ocean, like a promise that some broken things really could become beautiful again. Not because the past disappeared, but because love finally became stronger than it. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sea with gold, Nia looked at Rowan. He smiled back. Not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, not as a man trying to erase yesterday, but as a father grateful for today, and a man willing to spend the rest of his life earning tomorrow. If this story reminded you that trust is precious, truth always finds its way into the light, and genuine love is proven through actions more than words, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes that, even after the deepest betrayal, a life rebuilt with honesty can become even more beautiful than the one that was lost.
They say one mistake can destroy a lifetime. But what if that mistake cost a man his own family? 5 years ago, billionaire CEO Rowan Ashcroft fired his most loyal assistant, Nia Ellison, after believing a carefully planned lie. He never knew she walked out of his office carrying a secret that would change both of their lives forever. She disappeared without asking for revenge, without asking for justice, and without telling him she was pregnant. 5 years later, the doors to Rowan's office opened again. Standing there was the woman he thought he'd never see again. And beside her were 3 beautiful children with the same unmistakable eyes as his. In a single heartbeat, his perfect world began to collapse. But the biggest shock wasn't that he had children. It was discovering someone had stolen 5 years he could never get back. Was it already too late to fix the greatest mistake of his life? Watch until the end, because this story proves that the truth always finds its way home.